Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So welcome everybody for our final Innovate event. We thought we would start off by first just talking about the way our different disciplines approach knowledge and learning. And sorry if that glare is a bit of a problem in the background, but so I'm in an interesting case where theology and religious studies is actually a hybrid department. They sound like they're the same discipline, but they're not. Okay, and so I'll just give a couple of quick examples because we have projects that I'll show in a little bit later on that use one or the other or both for their thing. But theology is subjective. It's faith-based. Right? A theologian as an academic is making normative statements about what the people of that religion should believe, right? Now, just because it's subjective and faith-based does not mean it's lacking in academic rigor. For example, many of my Catholic theologian colleagues would write and have written things on why full LGBTQ inclusion is an imperative, a theological imperative in the Catholic Church. And to do that, they don't just get to write a thing of warm fuzzies. They have to rigorously go through the biblical texts. They have to rigorously go through the history of the church. They have to rigorously go through the canons of the church and so on and so forth to build a persuasive argument in order to say, this is what Catholics should believe, right? Religious studies, on the other hand, is more like a social science. It's objective in its approach, or as much as humans can be, right? It has the theory of religion, which would be like a basic, that would be its most core thing. And the theory of religion, or the task of religious studies, is to make the strange familiar and the familiar strange. So like two examples I like to give of that is, crosses, we see them everywhere. All right, I already, showing some in the office in the background here. Oh, you can see one in the background in my screen right there. They're commonplace to us, even a symbol of beauty or something. They're actually a symbol of a disgusting execution. It'd be like wearing little gas chambers or AR-15s around your neck. And if you saw a whole cult of people doing that, you'd be like, what a bunch of weirdos, right? So, one task of religious studies is to make you understand, like flip things on their head. On the other hand, take the strange thing and make it familiar. Relics. Why do Christians have these bones of dead saints in their churches? And make that familiar through like the way we all have keepsakes of mementos of grandparents and so on and so forth. So anyway, I think I bounced up against my 2 minutes right now allotted. The last thing I would just say is that religious studies is also kind of a conglomeration. You could take any one of the humanities and social sciences, and the religious studies side, you just add of. So meaning literature of religion, history of religion, philosophy of religion, psychology of religion, sociology of religion, anthropology of religion. I think you're getting it, right? Politics of religion. So anyhow, that's kind of that just an introduction to our topic and how we approach knowledge. And actually, I'm forgetting at the moment, blanking. Who's next? Debbie, right?
We'll go next. Yeah. Thank you. So, well, hello everybody, and thank you so much for being here tonight. I know it's getting towards the end of the semester, so we're probably stretched kind of thin. I really appreciate everybody being here. This is pretty great. So, yeah, I want to talk just for a minute here about chemistry. And I think a lot of people here are taking chemistry. I see a lot of students from my last semester, and then of course from this semester as well. So welcome everybody. Chemistry is it's one of the natural sciences. And so we're really interested in using the scientific method, coming up with questions, testing hypotheses, coming up with hypothesis, testing a hypothesis, retesting, maybe coming up with a conclusion, maybe if not, maybe we have to refine our hypothesis. And chemistry specifically is really interested in the molecular level. So I don't know if you can everybody see this okay? So molecules are really important for us, and it's hard for us we can't see them with our own eyes. So we use models to help us understand. And this is a little sample of lead here. And if it's in somebody's bloodstream, one thing that can happen is you can go ahead and react it with EDTA, ethylene diamine tetracetic acid. And the lone pairs, you guys know this, a lot of you know this, but the lone pairs on the nitrogen are going to come on here. And then there's another one, etc. And what's going to happen ultimately is it creates a cage all the way around it. So if you have lead poisoning, this is one way that you might be treated with it, is this EDTA molecule is going to go in, you get injected with it, it wraps around the lead, and it's able to scoop it up and have it go out through your urine stream. But look at that. I mean, there's so much beauty and complexity. And oh, you know, I got to do it. Anyway, this one, if I do it just right, take this up here, we would end up getting this forming 6 attachments to the lead. Okay, I have to like unattach, reattach. I won't take time right now, but it's actually really beautiful molecule that you end up with, and it serves a really good everyday purpose. So chemists are really interested in molecules. We're interested, like if you're taking second semester GChem, you know about what basically the whole semester breaks down into will it happen? That's what thermodynamics is asking, right? How fast will it go? That's what kinetics is asking. How far will it go? That's what equilibrium is asking. So we have these complex questions that we're trying to figure out. These reactions, are they going to happen? If they do reaction, how fast do they go? If they do happen, how fast do they go? How far do they go before they hit what's called equilibrium? Before there's, you know, they don't go all 100%, they go part way. And what can we do to coax them to move forward? So there's all kinds of really interesting permutations that we can be focusing on. So that's chemistry in a nutshell, and I will pass it on over to Jeff Morse.
All right, thank you. So I am an evolutionary biologist. So much like Professor Finocchio, I am in the physical sciences, the life sciences, and you know, just like her, we use the scientific method. We have people who were in my class last semester. I see many of you, or in this semester, know that we talk about that an awful lot. The hope is that we can come up with physical explanations for physical phenomena. We try not to delve into other explanations of knowledge and limit ourselves to those things that can be tested and testable. Because of this, and I'm going to go on a little side trajectory here, oftentimes this causes scientists, biologists in particular, to feel like their field is amoral. So we don't need to consider ethics. We don't need to consider connections to social sciences and humanities. But one of the things that I think the class will demonstrate to you guys today is that we are really thinking about those connections hard. That, you know, biology as the life science impinges probably most closely upon the humanities and the social sciences, because it raises the question of who we are as people. From a biological perspective, yes. From an evolutionary perspective, yes. And that makes people uncomfortable. And so with that, you know, I try to make sure we're taking great care to think about what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, as we move forward with these amazing technological advances that are really, really dramatically changing and revolutionizing my field. And with that, I will turn it back to Rico, Dr. Monge.
Didn't realize I was muted there. Actually, Daniel, I don't know if you saw the message I just sent you, but I suddenly had a panic moment in which can our students share screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, they have to be.
Yeah. Because I didn't know if they needed to send it to one of us and then share. All of a sudden, I was like, ah. So,
no, it's okay.
Yeah. All right. So great. So the first thing what each one of us are going to start off with is how our discipline approached integration this year. Then I'm going to move to kind of a slide showing you like samples of how what different students are thinking about doing. We're still in process at this point. And some of my students will be very grateful that I I kind of spiffed up the titles a little bit for them as I was going through the raw material. So anyway, first let me show you our prompt. This was our prompt. I have blotted out a couple parts because I don't want, you know, comparison of like, hey, why did my class have more or less of this than? So anyway, I don't have the due date or how long the paper is, but the essay prompt is at the end of the semester, you've asked to look back and reflect on how studying the history of Christianity through the related but distinct, as I explained a few moments ago, disciplines of theology and religious studies provides resources for which one can, the little windows get in my way, for which one can innovate new responses to social, ecological, and or economic issues. You'll be expected to explore, compare, and contrast how these resources compare with those you gain in your fall 2020 Innovate LLC course. And I'm sure many of you won't be surprised that I also expanded it beyond that because there's not always a natural connection there. But the key was this, that they're connecting something they've been learning in one of their other classes here at USD with either theology and how we do, you know, how that theology can be a positive inspiration to innovating solutions to social, ecological, and our economic issues, or one can do the religious studies approach, analyzing how horrible things objectively Christianity did in its history, colonialism, its role it played in genocides, etc. How there's an imperative to understand that in order to innovate fixing the problems that that Christianity brought about. So the, you know, an interesting and it's fun to watch students come up with different aspects there. So let me now show you a few titles. I mean, they're not titles. I summarized, you know, so far what the students have been assigned to do is give me kind of what their rough thoughts. I mean, we're advancing to the next stages each week, but rough thoughts on what they would like to focus on. And yeah, this is I first of all, my students, just if you don't show up on here, it's not a comment on your quality of it. I just had to, you know, for economy of time, pick certain ones, and you know, anyway. So yes, we have Megan Wall. She is going to be innovating solutions to the persecution of oppressed peoples using Jesus's core teachings of the kingdom of God. Jacqueline Gore has got a project that's basically about religion, the teachings of Jesus, and how it relates to equal opportunity and education. Juliette Dignam is going to be integrating user-centered design, Christian values, and the question of the homeless crisis. Both Nick Giannakopoulos and Michael Cito are focused on the kingdom of God and movements like Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate. Matt Peltier is innovating solutions to contemporary issues with St. Augustine. Hunter Wright is comparing Stoic philosophy and the teachings of Christ to innovate richer understandings of the good life. Galen Forbes Roberts is going to be putting together morality, markets, and government, and the impact of religion. And this one also kind of, I think, both the positive and negative that religion can do in that case. Logan Tatum will be doing the history of Christian colonial oppression and the decolonial imperative of the kingdom of God, right? So you can see that one's got a theology and religious studies thing going on at the same time, right? Critique of Christianity via religious studies, but then arguing that there's a decolonial imperative through the theological lens of what Jesus taught. Alexia Rojas, People Over Profit, Unmooring Chemistry from Corporate Capitalism Through the Teachings of Jesus. Isabella Bertolozzi, Innovating New Theories of Christian Origins Through the Lens of Sociology. That one's just looking, how do we think about where did this religion come from, even. Andrew Olson, Christianity's Historical Paradoxical Relation to Science, Innovator and Inhibitor. Zane's got The Student Debt Crisis, Innovating Answers Based on the Teachings of Jesus and the Communalist Practices of Early Christians. Sarah Rosales, Completing the Program, How Jesus' Teachings Help Shape the More Just Society and the Liberatory Work That Remains to Be Done. Madison Wainwright, also Creating Dignity for the Homeless Through Architecture and the Principles of the Kingdom. Annalise Ortega, Deconstructing American Apocalypticism and Its Harmful Effects on Environmental Policy. Miguel Mendoza, Engineering a More Just Society, Grounding Applied Science in the Humanities, in the humanitarian message of the, or humanitarian philosophy of Jesus, sorry. Zachary Selby, Martyrs Over Heroes. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Martyrdom and the Power to Change the World. And finally, Anisha Kumar, Christianity's Double-Edged Sword in the Black American Struggle for Human Rights, Jesus as Model for Defiant Liberation and Passive Submission. So you can see a wide range of things that we're doing, but I'm really excited about what the students have been thrown out there so far and the directions that these look like they're gonna go in. But what we're gonna finish our little section with right now is I'm gonna turn it over to our own Ansley Nelson from my class, and she and Cameron Lynch are gonna do a quick kind of sample presentation of where they're at right now in the project that they're tackling. So Ansley, Cameron, thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna share my screen really quick. Let me know if you can see it. Okay.
Yes, we can. It's great.
Thank you. All right. So our topic question was, how can the discipline of theology and the discipline of economics come together to innovate solutions to reduce homelessness and economic disparity? So this topic intrigued me because I volunteered throughout middle school and high school at homeless shelters, food clothing drives, and pantries, and did like meal preps at food banks and stuff. And I wanted to also join serving up pancakes with the Hope through USC's Changemaker Hub, but then COVID happened, so I couldn't really do that. And I learned shocking statistics about homelessness in San Diego when I attended the Innovative session last semester. My econ class got me interested in learning about the economical and financial side of homelessness and how economic inequality can contribute to it.
Yeah, and for me, the topic of homelessness really interested me because I've grown up in Los Angeles. That's a city, obviously, where there's nearly 59,000 people who are homeless. In high school, I volunteered to serve at a local food bank with my father, and I also served the Missionaries of the Poor in Kingston, Jamaica. And last semester in my LLC class, I did a presentation on homelessness in San Diego. And during that presentation, that's where I learned about ways to help our city's homeless population. I'm also interested in learning about income inequality due to our social location, race, religion, and many other factors, because that can also play a role in homelessness.
Okay, so here are some statistics about economic disparity and homelessness statistics from the Pew Research Center. So overall, 61% of Americans say that there is too much economic inequality in the country today. The wealth gap between America's richest and poorest families is more than doubled from 1989 to 2016. And then income inequality in the US is the highest of all the G7 nations, according to data from Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The black to white ratio income gap in the US has persisted over time. Median black household income was 61% of the median white household income in 2018. It was just really shocking that these issues still continue to occur today and can play a huge role in homelessness. Here's some more eye-opening statistics from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. So Far too many people in America sleep outside and in other locations not meant for human habitation. And this group did not have any form of shelter. That includes over 200,000 people, which is 37% of the overall homeless population. Among individuals experiencing homelessness, the numbers are more dire. 1 in 2 are unsheltered altogether. Homelessness is a prevalent issue, and now even more than ever due to the pandemic. So COVID-19 is an immediate concern. When it's combined with the previous troubling trends, there's a danger of increasing numbers of people experiencing homelessness, including related health issues and instability challenges. The following factors are relevant. So, older adult homelessness was projected to experience steep increases even before the pandemic and economic crisis. So, unsheltered homelessness has already been trending upward since 2016 by growing over 22% over the last 5 years. So now on the theological side of this, the economic discipline I learned last semester relates to theology and Jesus's teachings because Jesus taught about economics more than any other subject. However, Maximus, I definitely butchered that. His book, The Economy of the Kingdom of God, Social Conflict and Economic Relations in Luke's Gospel, covers this heavily. Monetary issues are the most common conflicts within the Bible, people suffering from poverty or lack of food or financial instability. Jesus taught people about the dangers and temptations of greed. Many of his teachings centered on these economic issues, encouraging his followers to help others in need. The Lord's teachings in Leviticus relate heavily to our presentation, how modern society tends to treat people struggling with poverty and homelessness. In chapter 25, verse 37, people are instructed that you shall not lend him your money at interest, nor give him your food for profit. And he also says in chapter 33, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor. And then the reading from Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 47 through 57 relates as well, because it's commonly taught that homosexuality is the reason God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. But if you reflect on the prophet Ezekiel's reasonings for why they were destroyed, it's actually because they were greedy and had no concern for the poor and needy. So basically, this is relevant to our course in economic disparity because it's difficult for people to help others out of genuine care and concern. People in today's society tend to only partake in good deeds or acts of kindness if they receive credit, recognition, or if it benefits them in some way. So this class and our integration project got us thinking about how in today's world, we need to work on humility and understanding. Sometimes we tend to jump to conclusions and judge people who are homeless. It's hard for us to realize that we need to be grateful that we are not in that situation, but we also need to take action to help people who are. We have to stop thinking all homeless people did not work to have financial stability or got themselves in that situation. Some cannot help if they were born into it. And this class and project helped us to put it into perspective, to have empathy and compassion for those struggling with homelessness and economic disparity, because we have to think about if the roles were reversed and you were the person struggling. My integration course, first semester in economics, taught me to realize how homelessness can happen to anyone due to the lack of financial stability and major shifts in the economy like recessions and depressions. So this quote, far too many Americans are severely housing cost burdened. So 10.9 million households spend more than 50% of their income on housing. In an economic crisis, the loss of job or hours at work could quickly lead to homelessness.
Yeah, and this kind of goes along with homelessness and vacant dwelling because in the United States, as of 2019, over 500,000 Americans don't have a home to sleep in on any given night, while almost 17 million potential homes are standing empty. So if the overall numbers of homeless citizens weren't shocking enough, between 2017 and 2019, there was an increase of over 34,000 unsheltered homeless people nationally. And that's even before the global pandemic and expected recession. So in 2019, California had a homeless population exceeding 151,000. That's more than 18 times the homeless average across all other states. And California also had 1.2 million empty properties in 2018. That's more than 9 empty properties per homeless person. So 63% across the country believe that they're at risk of being homeless if they lose their income, with 49% having less than 1 month's worth of savings to pay their rent/mortgage. And these statistics are quite disturbing, and we really need to take action and reduce these numbers. So with continuation on the discipline of theology, the principles of the kingdom of God play a crucial role in innovating solutions to reduce homelessness and poverty today. So the 5 principles of the kingdom of God are ethical reciprocity, the love of enemies, humility, forgiveness even when wronged, and also the cancellation of debt. So ethical reciprocity and the love of enemies are positive motivations, and they can assist us in bettering ourselves and taking the next steps to try and reduce homelessness and economic disparity. They both take on a positive aspect of treating everyone equally with kindness, no matter what their background or situations, or if they make big mistakes that can contribute to them being homeless. Loving your enemies is a big step in becoming the bigger person and creating an accepting and inclusive environment for everyone. Humility and forgiveness are motivations that help us not hold grudges nor be blocked by obstacles. Everyone is fighting their own battles and deserves the same opportunities. Humility helps us be grateful for all the blessings that we have and also be more considerate of others who do not have the same opportunities, and not to blame them for how they end up in their situation, but rather be empathetic and compassionate towards them. Forgiveness is important because some people have made mistakes that have contributed to them being homeless, but blaming them for getting themselves to that point accomplishes nothing but helping them in any way you can make a difference. The last principle of the kingdom of God is cancellation of debt. It can motivate people to be more generous and donate or help in any way they can. Sometimes people want to build their own power and success and do not think about how they can share some of their wealth with others. Cancellation of debt is deeply related to the reason why these vacant homes are essentially being held hostage. It could help give people the chance to rebuild their lives. However, many homeless shelters have programs to assist people in finding jobs and getting back on their feet. They do not charge them for these services, etc. And as volunteers, we need to help those in need without expecting anything in return. So innovative solutions to reduce homelessness, to reduce homelessness and economic disparity are volunteering at homeless shelters, food banks, and also donating non-perishable food or clothing at your local shelters and drives and food banks. And also our idea of stop wasting vacant housing and building career pathways to assist homeless people in getting jobs. And that's what we have so far. Thank you guys so much for listening.
That's it. Thank you, guys.
Still a work in progress.
Thank you both. That was I met with you obviously to talk about what you were doing, but I have to say you blew me away with what a great job you just did. So thank you both. And from there we will turn it on over to Debbie.
Great. Thank you so much. Wow, that was just wonderful work. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So I'd like to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so great. So I just want to give you a quick outline of kind of our overall picture in my course in the Chem 152. You can see on the bottom there, there's weeks 1 through 15 to describe our semester. And what I decided to do for the class is to have a series of discussion boards that are set up in Blackboard. At the beginning of the semester, I kind of got to learn a little bit about what the students are interested in and what kind of things they want to pursue. And then we moved on to being able to start making some connections across disciplines to real world scenarios, and then brought in learning outcome courses to help us see connections and how do we look at a given disciplinary perspective through the lens of the learning outcomes for the different courses. And then we're working on some posters. So the students have identified topics that are really interesting to them, and we have some posters that were set up. And the assignment prompt they came up with is based upon what happened. So I kind of waited on the assignment prompt to get a feel for what the interest were. And I'm going to show that to you in just a minute. But the other two components for the rest of the semester, after we finish collecting all the posters, then there'll be a last discussion board where the students are going to give feedback to each other regarding their posters. And at the end of the semester, we have a reflective assignment. That's our big picture plan. And in terms of the poster assignment, there's two main scenarios that the students could go ahead and focus on. So one is like, okay, you're part of some kind of interdisciplinary think tank, like the World Health Organization, U.S. government, something like that, nonprofit organization, and you want to come up with challenges and possible solutions to whatever the problem is that's interesting to you. And so the other one has to do with just kind of if there's a certain topic of interest that you're starting to look at in a new way. And if you wanted to think about that across different disciplines and share that information out. So those are our two main assignment prompts. And in terms of first year integration learning outcomes, the poster is really focusing on the first one, and we're articulating the reflection component is focusing on learning outcomes. There's a little list. In my class, here are the poster titles and the disciplines that students connected chemistry and the other discipline to the topic of their interest. And a couple things I want to point out, this will be the same slide repeatedly, but just it's going to look a little different, okay? And some things I want to point out is that there was a real interest in women's health. That was a big picture. The COVID-19 vaccine was also really important to people. Another topic was hunger, and another topic was environmental issues. So collectively, those were kind of things that students in my class were particularly interested in. And you can see all these really interesting titles. And Christine and Renee actually offered to say a few words about their posters. So I'd like to give them a chance to say what they'd like about their poster, and just show you a couple of other posters. So that's our plan here. So Christine, if you're available, feel free to unmute.
Hey guys, so Christine and I, we focused on malnutrition and food insecurity in developing countries. We did this because we thought it was a very prominent issue. And we decided to look at this since many individuals are subjected to food insecurity. Many of these individuals live below the poverty line. And this comes from many developing countries. Especially when people don't have access to viable water or food source, they become food insecure. And when countries and governments don't supply these necessities to these individuals, they can often become refugees or displaced persons. So this is why we decided to focus on this topic. And as a solution to food insecurity, when we researched, we found that we can use ready-to-use therapeutic foods. These are high energy, easy to use packets. And the reason why these are so good is because they've already been effectively implemented in over 45 countries. And most of these countries are developing countries. And you can see on the image on the left how different children and adults can use them. Another reason why they're so important and easy to use is because they don't require any water, cooking, or refrigeration, and they have a shelf life of 2 years. Okay, and then I'll let Christine take over.
Yeah, so we were looking at the chemistry viewpoint and then the math viewpoint. And so from the chemist viewpoint, their main goal is really just to look how they can add elements or molecules in order to enrich and fortify these foods. And so with fortified foods, it's a lot of things that even we get every single day. So a lot of milk, it's fortified with vitamin D. But then for these ready to use food packets, they have a lot of added minerals such as like the selenium, iodine, and zinc. And then there's also vitamin B6, which is super crucial. It really helps plant growth. And then there's the different structures of all the different types of vitamin B6. And then from the math viewpoint, it's kind of similar, but it's mainly just comparing different situations and using different formulas. And there's a new fractional derivative that was found in calculus that is super helpful. And it's really just doing lots of equations in order to determine the most cost-effective mechanism to support these people. And then if you could please go to the next slide. They're mainly pretty similar in the sense that they use a lot of different mathematical methods, and it's just trying to come up with the most viable solution. But the difference is that math is really just looking at equations only and comparing different opportunities and trying to find the best one to use, while chemistry is looking at the best way to fortify these foods and looking at the chemical components that are being added to the foods in order to make them more supplemental for these developing countries. And yeah, that's, I think, what we have.
Thank you so much. That's great. So I just want to mention here with the format, you can kind of get the idea of the details of the assignment. But everybody looked at the chemist viewpoint and another viewpoint, and then came up with a possible solution, or in the case of a special topic, something that was interesting to them that they wanted to share out. And then also to look at key similarities and differences across the disciplines. So this is really great. So I'm going to just share with you a couple of other posters here, just so you can see illustrations of some of the various disciplines. So Hannah, Ben, and Anna, and Megan worked as a group of 4. Students have an option to work in group or individually, whatever worked best for them. And so they worked in a group of 4, and anytime you're working in a group, you had to add on an extra discipline. So that's why there's a couple extra disciplines there. And so they were concerned about the nationwide distribution of the COVID vaccine. And they looked at similarities and differences.
Debbie, I think it's hard to hear you. I think we're losing your sound.
Oh,
Oh, there you are.
can you hear me okay?
Yes, now it's perfect. Before
Okay.
it was just really faded. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Great. Oh, thank you for saying that. That's great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and another poster we have here, this one's by Maria. And she was concerned about the issue of hunger. And you can see that she looked at the chemistry viewpoint of actually several different, she provided several different components of a chemistry viewpoint to this issue, as well as several different economic concerns. And she has a possible solution that both sides would agree is to produce food locally, an affordable solution, such as covering the ground with organic material using preservatives and buying freezer trucks. So several good solutions to that. And just in the interest of time, I'm kind of trying to monitor the time too. I'm just going to kind of highlight a couple other ones here. We have another one here. This one's by Tabor, and he looked at cultured meat from both a chemist and an economist perspective. And Maria had focused on several of the molecules in her presentation, and in Tabor's, he's looking at molecular level, but also talking about the process of the testing, taking observations. Included a chart there that's very helpful. And I think I'm just, in the interest of time, I think I'm going to just kind of bounce to the next couple. Roman did a project on her own, and it has to do with constructing bamboo fiber menstrual pads that has cellulose. So cellulose is the main component in bamboo, and there's a lot of hydrogen bonding sites for those of you that are taking chemistry classes. The hydrogen bonding sites in the cellulose are really good at absorbing water. And she looked at it from a chemistry and a first-year writing perspective, you can see. And she wrote up a possible advertisement that could be used for women in rural areas. So really addressing the audience, who's the consumer for this, what are they interested in, what's important to them, what do they value? That's a very important aspect of writing, knowing what your audience is. So she addressed that in there. And there's another one. Oh, Emma's right here. Yes. And Emma had looked at eco-friendly, accessible cosmetics from chemistry and sociology points of view. And she was looking at VOCs and pollution levels and issues related to that. So I think I'm just about out of time, but I'm super excited that I got to just give you a little glimpse at several of the posters that the students worked on. They're just wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now. And I can pass it over to Jeff Morse, Dr. Morse.
All right. Let me share my screen really quickly. I will try to be fast here on my introduction. The prompts for the students have been 2 essays that ask them to link a topic that we have covered sometime during the past week, and they had multiple weeks to choose from, with a topic from their LLC course, or if they found another integration more interesting to them, they were more than welcome to do that. And so you might think, well, what would biology integrate with? And it turns out a lot of things. We had interactions, essays written that spanned history, theology and religious studies, first year writing. We're going to see some examples of these. East Asian cinema, philosophy. Within the social sciences, again, a big topic that many people covered that was related to genetics and evolution was the topic of race and racism. This was looked at from a number of different perspectives: sociological perspectives, economics perspectives, ethical perspectives, ethnic studies perspectives, psychological perspectives. There were a number of connections with sociology courses. The integration with psychology courses, the nature and nurture kind of consequences of our traits. Economics, economy is a superorganism, the importance of symbiosis and cooperation and the interdependency of peoples and societies. And then finally, quite a bit of interaction with ethics, including things like who has the right to your genomic information for purposes of economy or scale. So we have covered an awful lot in these essays, and this is just an overview. And obviously, I didn't give you time to read what everybody was doing. There were 62 essays, so I could not talk through everything. But what I've done is I've taken 4 different fields that were addressed in this with some really excellent essays, and I've asked the students, 4 students, to present on that. So I'm going to begin by asking, let's see, by asking Gianna to share her screen and talk about her fascinating integration between immigration and the introduction of creativity into society, and gene flow bringing in diversity for natural selection to be creative on. So I'm going to let her take this on.
Can we see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Oh no, I want to go back. So I connected our genomes and evolution class to my intro to ethnic studies class. I related gene flow to what constituted US citizenship in the early 1700s to 1800s. So gene flow introduces genetic diversity to allow the creative process of natural selection to work. So with an introduction of new alleles, this allows for greater genetic diversity within a population. And so this connects to the increase in cultural diversity with the migration of people to new areas. And so we see the crossing over of different races, and this relates to gene flow with discussion and polygenic traits like skin color. And skin color was a defining feature during this time that constituted whether someone was allowed to be a US citizen or not. And so we see that there's a connection between genomes and evolution and studies in humanities. And we can further see how genetic and cultural diversity are further linked.
All right, thank you, Gianna. I'm going to ask Holly to go ahead and share hers.
Okay, so I related mine to my ethnic studies as well. I didn't make a PowerPoint, but here's my intro paragraph. So all eukaryotes are derived from a common ancestor. This includes all plants and all animals. Under the category of animals are humans. With our country's history of racial inequality, white people who claim sovereignty over all people of color must not have realized that all humans are genetically similar under our skin. We are all made up of the same 4 nitrogenous bases, contain the same number of chromosomes, and carry out the same functions within our cells. This means that no matter what race, ethnicity, shape, or size of a person, the only thing setting humans apart from each other is the order of their 4 nitrogenous bases. The order of these bases code for a protein, which then determine the genotypes and phenotypes of that individual. From the outside, there appears to be differences between one another. However, on the inside, there is nothing that makes one person's genes better than the other, specifically one skin color better than the other. Therefore, our nation's history of racial inequality is proven to be nothing less than an abuse of power by white people.
Great, thank you, Holly. Really, really fascinating integration between what we've learned about genetics and your ethnic studies class. Excellent. Let's see, Annie, I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm going to share my screen.
Great.
Can everyone see it?
Absolutely.
Okay. So my integrated assignment, I connected biology with social justice. And so in Bio 242, we discussed the future of genetic engineering, which is the alteration of the genome, and then also the moral implications that surround having access to such genetic information. We talked about whether private companies and businesses should be allowed to sell genetic information or whether it should be accessible to anyone with health or medical insurance. And then we also talked about the ethics of genomics and genetic engineering. So it's kind of a controversial question. So the question essentially is, should parents with access to their children's genetic information then use it to their advantage and genetically modify their children's DNA to guarantee a healthy child? And there really is no right answer to this question, and there's a lot of gray area because on one hand, if a parent is aware of their child's maladaptive genes that could lead to cancer or diseases, they might feel a pressure or more responsibility to act on it. But at the same time, it's really, really expensive, and not all families have the financial means to pay for these procedures or to get this access of information. And then I was able to connect it to my social justice class, where we've been discussing how privilege and oppression are present in modern day society. So I made the connection that it'd be a privilege that individuals could have access to this genetic information and that they would have the financial resources to alter their genome if they wanted to do so. And then it'd be oppression if individuals were not given that same opportunity because of their status in society. So whether that's their social economic status, their legal status, their age, race, or education. And so I was also thinking about solutions to this because it could possibly further exacerbate the disparity between the privileged and less privileged if this happens. And then I talked about affordable universal healthcare that could possibly cover access to genetic information in engineering. And so that way, if someone wanted to have that data, they could, and it would be funded by the government. And finally, that's something that the UK has already been looking to do. And so private companies could benefit from this, but then I also think it's important for the government to understand that everyone should have access to this information, regardless of their status in society. So that's a little bit what I talked about. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Great, thank you, Annie. Laura, then Laura will be our last presenter here for us.
Yeah, hi, I'm just gonna share my screen. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'll just share what I wrote. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So I talked about psychology and biology, specifically adaptive evolution and phobias. So when we think about phobias, our automatic response is like snakes, spiders, heights, maybe even other people. And this is because adaptive evolution taught our ancestors that these things meant danger. So they stayed away from it and therefore survived. And that led to our society today. Related to psychology, behavioral therapy works best to mitigate phobias because it associates the negative stimuli of the phobia with a positive association. But in order to adapt to the circumstances of an ever-changing environment and world, we should move past like simplistic phobias and focus on more pressing agendas such as climate change and COVID-19. So the evolution of society comes with the evolution of phobias. And because of this, we should not only shift our attention towards more immediate crises like the ones I listed, but we should also adapt our therapies and treatments to the issues faced in our new world. This is why innovation is imperative in our society because of the increase in mental health disorders due to things like climate change and the pandemic. But with creative and innovative minds and the power of adaptation, we have the potential to fight our present day external and internal battles. And just some examples of some innovative therapies that we could use. There's ongoing research about previously criminalized pharmaceuticals, and it's been positive so far, but we're just kind of observing how it goes. And then also psychotherapy, which is pretty controversial, but yeah, there's just more research into it and we're just gonna see how that goes. But yeah, thank you for listening.
All right, thank you, Laura. All right. Debbie, do you want to take over now or?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I think one thing that we were curious about is, do you all have access to the chat? Do you mind getting your chat ready? Because one thing that we were curious about is there anything from the session today or this evening that got you thinking about things a little differently, or anything that was inspiring to you? And we'd really like to hear about that. Curious too, like what kind of topics people are interested in general. Like in my class, it was women's health issues, environmental issues, COVID-19 vaccine distribution, hunger. We heard of homelessness. Anybody want to throw something out? That'd be great.
Looks like that homelessness not being a problem, the lack of homes. I figured that one. That's one of those stats I came across a few years ago, and it's haunted me ever since. And it's similar stats in most capitalist nations. The UK has similar figures. As is France and Germany. So it's a real issue.
I guess we should ask too before we close. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to share with the group?
I just wanted to say that I really liked one of the last speeches on the genetic modifications and how that could be a problem within social inequality. I know it's like in intermediate stages or not even that now, but I just love the idea and the thought of that becoming an issue throughout the years.
Yeah.
Among things I'm struck by are Dr. Lopez Perez's work with his students. in terms of imagining structures and the way it relates to the organization of chemical compounds, right? Just in terms of structure, and then how students have applied these structures in innovative ways across disciplines to address a variety of social issues and problems today.
You know, some years ago, Debbie and I had a showcase where we talked about models, you know, across disciplines with engineering, chemistry, architecture. There were so many similarities. I was really thrilled to hear Chiara's comment of bringing in together multiple disciplines to find new lines of research. Like just on your insight, you could probably spend a career studying that intersection, you know, and it's innovative because it brings together multiple things that are disparate, right? You're not staying on a disciplinary track, but you're rather synthesizing across. So these opportunities, these kernels that we run into by accident, right, on a slide, maybe, are really remarkable opportunities to innovate, to return back to your origin, to your discipline, change it from within or from without. Thank you for that. That's really remarkable. I think across all three groups, there were so many different connections being put together that so many insights, absolutely. I think it's also really, really useful to think about how one's discipline creates knowledge, you know, in a scientific way, in a subjective way, in a discursive way, you know, yeah.
Well, it's time for me to pray to the Lord. So, and go participate in a reenactment of his crucifixion, talking about making the strange familiar and the familiar strange. So, thank you all, and I hope the getting to see me in my clothes was an accidental little fun.
Yes.
Addition.
And thank you, contributing students and students who participated.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Let me thank also the faculty. I mean, everybody. It's been great the entire year, all the series that we've completed. And yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great evening, everybody.
Everybody.
See you guys tomorrow for my class. Bye.
See everyone. Bye. Thank you all.